So welcome everybody to yet another Sydney IANDS gathering. It is June and we have a guest speaker with us, Marie Benton, and this is quite an exciting conversation. Usually our speakers are folks who have had the near-death experience or STE, spiritually transformative experience, and it's always wonderful to hear experiences, stories, of course. And one of the really important areas that we touch on often, but probably don't dive into deeply enough, is the ripple effect of those experiences. How do they ripple out to our loved ones, to those that are closest to us, to professionals who we have contact with in our lives, our friends, our relatives, etc. And so we're very lucky today because we have a local Aussie speaker. I always love our local speakers. So Marie will be talking to us about these ripple effects. And just to let you know a bit about Marie. So her journey started with a psychic development course. She's then gone on to become a Reiki Master, a clinical hypnotherapist, a past life therapist, a Newton Life Between Lives therapist, and a teacher of past life hypnotherapy. I do hope you're going to touch on a bit of that as well, Marie, because that's
I'd love to.
Good. And she has also studied trance mediumship. So Marie is not your average psychotherapist. Marie gets it on that level in terms of spiritually transformative experiences and the extraordinary. And naturally, any professional who goes down that road has had many of those experiences. There's always a story there, so I look forward to hearing Marie's. And one of the most interesting parts is, of course, aside from her professional journey and understanding these deep experiences of her clients, her husband had his own near-death experience. And so Marie brings the perspective of what that is like from multiple layers as partner, wife, professional, family member. And so we're going to dive in and hear from Marie. So I will just leave it over to you, Marie, and welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Nicole, and thanks, Neela, for hosting me today. It's really good to be here, and I thank everybody for giving up a couple of hours on their Sunday afternoon to listen to my story. So thanks. What I'd like to do is give you a background of my family so that you can really appreciate where we're from, and to know that, this type of journey happens to everybody and not just those of us that are out there and we understand, and, those of us that are not necessarily on the spiritual journey yet, that some of other of us are. So I was brought up as very strict Roman Catholic. My mother was Italian, hence Roman Catholicism, and my dad went to mass every day. My cousin's a nun, and I was sent off to an all-girls convent. And Perry, my husband, he was brought up with a mixture. So half of his family were Catholic. His mother's family were Catholic. His father was Church of England. So there was lots of religious doctrine as we were growing up. For Perry, he is a very logical, down-to-earth man. Lauren, my eldest daughter, who is here today, she'll verify everything that I'm saying about her father. He organises big sporting events all over the world, such as Formula One and Red Bull Air Race. So you can imagine he's a very methodical, analytical, logical man. He's a very good man, but he's a workaholic. So the girls and I have been used to him being away from home more at times than he's been at home. He's a very good provider. He's been a great father, a great husband, to the degree that he has been able to be, because he's been away a lot, and that logical mind says, right, well, this is what good fathers do, so I'll do it. But when we moved to Australia 16 years ago, it was going to be a new start for us all. We'd grown away from the religious doctrine a bit. You know, my children were still at Catholic schools, but we'd grown away from it a bit, and we were our own people, and we were ready to set out on our own journey. Less than a year, and Perry was still traveling. He was still coming and going, and I have 2 daughters, and the girls and I were in Australia doing our thing. They were at school. Lauren had just started work. I was working. We just started our new lives here. Less than a year after we arrived, we all went on a diving expedition. We're all scuba divers. We went off to Stradbroke Island for a diving trip. We were going to be over there for 2 days. Just before we left, Perry had the most horrendous headache that he and I thought was a migraine. He'd suffered from migraines for years, and I had too, and we thought it was a migraine. So he said, you know what, I'm just going to lie in the back of the car and you drive and, you know, do the diving thing with the girls. Don't let them miss out. I'll be okay. This is Perry. So off we went, and I drove us over to Stradbroke Island, and all Perry could do was lie in bed. This migraines, taking migraine meds, really wasn't shifting. But he said, you and the girls go and do your dive. Okay, so we went and did our dive, and we came back, and he was in excruciating pain. So I took him to the doctor at the little clinic on Stradbroke, and she diagnosed migraine. Here's some more migraine meds, take your migraine meds. Okay. Anyway, it didn't get any better. So later on that evening, he said to me, you know, this feels different. He said, it's not like a normal migraine. The pain is worse. And he wasn't speaking like this. He was in excruciating pain. But he said the pain's worse. And he said the visual disturbance is very different to that I normally get. So I bundled him and the girls in the car, drove back to the mainland, and drove him straight to our local hospital. They took one look at him, ran some tests, and they diagnosed a brain bleed, which was horrendous. There was just the 4 of us here. We had some friends here, but no family members. And I wasn't quite sure, you know, what to do about this. And they said, we'd like to transfer him to a specialist hospital. We'd like to transfer him to St Andrews in Brisbane. So, okay, fine. At this point, a friend that we had known from the UK, who lives here now, came to the hospital to join us. And she took the children home, and then she came to join me at the hospital. When we arrived at the hospital, there was a neurosurgeon and a neurologist waiting for us. This was like 9 o'clock at night. And they took Perry in and they made him comfortable. And bearing in mind all this time, Perry's saying, I'm okay. It's just a migraine. It's just a bit different, but I'm okay. Yeah. And they said, they showed me all of the scans that they had taken at the local hospital. And they said, do you understand what's happened? And I said, well, sort of. So I'm standing in this A&E centre. I've got a neurosurgeon one side of me with his arm around me, a neurologist the other side of me with his arm around me, explaining all of these X-rays and scan results and pointing out this brain bleed on my husband's brain. My children are at home with somebody that we hadn't known for very long. I'm right across the other side of the world, away from my family and friends, and I'm being told that literally my husband may die. I was just in shock. So they said to me, they were really, really good to me. And they said, so what we're going to do tomorrow is this, 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 and this. And in the state that I was in, I said, oh, so what time would you like me to bring him back to you tomorrow? No, 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 he stays with us tonight. Okay. So they settled him in, and my friend that had come to the hospital had to drive me home. I was in no fit state to drive. And there was all of these thoughts going through my mind. It was, well, we were on temporary residency visas at that time, where we subsequently went on to become permanent residents, and we're now citizens and have been for a number of years. But at the time, we were still temporary residents. So I'm thinking, are we going to have to sell our house? Are we going to have to go back to the UK? What do I tell the girls about their father? It was horrendous. So I go back the next day, and Perry is, he's high as a kite, you know, he's floating on the ceiling, seeing pink elephants. Thankfully, they had given him enough pain relief to make him as comfortable as he could be. And I sat by his bed for a while. And then they said, and my girlfriend came. They said, well, we're going to take Perry for an angiogram now. And they explained that they were going to pass this little camera in through his groin, up through his body, through his heart, and up into his brain. Okay, this is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be done. And here's where it starts to get a bit freaky. So they take him off, and my girlfriend and I were sitting waiting in his room. And when he came back, goodness knows how long afterwards, he was gone for a long time. He came back and he was conscious, but as he was wheeled into his room, he wouldn't look at me. And I thought, they found something even worse here. I don't know. He knows more than I do. And I went into his room, and he told me to leave. Now, this wasn't Perry. This wasn't him at all. Told me to leave the room, and he pulled his sheet up over his head, so I couldn't see him. So I waited outside, and I said to the nurse, what's going on? My husband is very, very emotional. And again, this wasn't Perry. You know, men don't show their emotions in the UK. They keep a stiff upper lip. Very emotional. And she said, he is extremely emotional. Let me get him settled, and then maybe you can come in to see him. So I was thinking all sorts of things. Finally, after probably a good hour or so, because he was on 15-minute obs, so the nurses were in and out all the time. And the nurses went in, and they came out after about, probably an hour after he came back from the angiogram, and they said, okay, he said, you can go in now. And I went in, and he was comfortable. He wasn't in too much pain, but he wasn't really out there on drugs either. He was very calm at this point. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I've just had the most weird experience, and I'm completely overwhelmed emotionally. He said, I don't know what to say, what to do, what to think about this. And he told me what had happened was, when he was in theatre, he was aware of, he could just see lights and shadows and flickers, because the brain bleed was in the part of his brain that affects sight. So he'd lost most of his sight, but he could see light and shadows and flickers. And he said he remembers being in the theatre, and he could see the flashing lights of monitors, and he could hear monitors. And the next thing he knew, he said, I was in this, he described it as a corridor. He said, I was in this huge, long corridor. And lining this corridor, each side, was everybody that he had ever lost in his entire life. He said there were even family friends that had passed when he was a child. His grandfather was there, his father was there. The interesting thing was, my father was there too. The interesting thing was, his mother was there too. Now at this time, his mother was still living and she was in the UK. So I'm assuming that she had astral traveled, her soul had come to be with her son at what could have been an exit point for him. So she was there too. And he said people that he'd even forgotten about, they lived near a farm when he was young. And he said the farmer used to let him ride the cows in when they were due to be milked. And the farmer was there. All of these people throughout his entire life were there. He said, my mum was there at the end of the corridor. And he said behind her, he said, was this brightest light that he had ever seen. He said it was so bright, it was like nothing he could ever imagine. And he was a lot closer to my mum than he was to his mum. So it made sense that my mum was there for him. And he said he was floating along this corridor. And he said the feeling was absolutely euphoric. He said there was no pain, there was no suffering. He said it was pure and utter joy. He said, and all of these people, each side of the corridor, they were all clapping him, welcoming him, well done, you know, come home. He said that's how he felt. They were welcoming him home. And he said he's never felt anything like that before in his life. And he looked at this figure at the end and recognized her as my mum. And as he floated towards my mum, he thought about me and the girls. And he said, as soon as he thought about me and the girls, bang, he was back in that operating theatre. And he said he could hear them talking and scrambling, and he could see those flashing lights again. And he said he was immediately back in pain and discomfort, but he knew that something had happened, and he couldn't quite interpret it. He had to process it. And when he came back to his room after his experience, he said that's what he was doing. He was trying to process it so that he could tell me what he had been going through. And he did tell me as we sat in that room. And one of the interesting things was my girlfriend sat in the room with us. Now, we knew her and her family when they lived in the UK. That's when they met them. They're an Australian family, and they had moved back to Australia 7 years before we had moved here. A couple of years previous to us moving, her mother had passed in Australia when we were still in the UK. We didn't attend the funeral. We sent flowers and cards, but we didn't attend the funeral. But he said to my friend, he said, your mum was there. He said, I saw Margaret, your mum. And he said, she was wearing the dress, the colour, the shape, the dots on the dress, the hat she was wearing. He said, and she was smoking. And at this point, my girlfriend Linda, she went white. She said, that's what we buried my mum in. even the hat, because that was her favourite hat. And she said she had to give up smoking because it wasn't doing her health any good. And she loved a cigarette. And Linda said before the funeral, she had been to the funeral home and she had put a packet of cigarettes in the coffin with her mum to take with her. And she was in the corridor wearing the outfit and smoking a cigarette. And Linda was with me as Perry was undergoing this experience. It was quite amazing. Well, I'm glad to say that Perry's made a really, really good recovery. He still has headaches now and again. This was back in 2005. So he still has headaches, and his eyesight isn't great, but he's made a really good recovery. He's been discharged from hospital, and he's been able to go back to work for a number of years, which is really good. The interesting thing is, before they discharged him, I asked them at the hospital if anything unusual happened in the operating theatre when he had the angiogram, and they were very vague. They wouldn't give me any definitive answers about what went on. Oh no, I think it was routine, if my memory serves me correctly. They were very, very vague. And when I asked them specifically if his heart had stopped, I'm not sure. I'd have to look at his records. You know, so it was all brushed to one side. But since his NDE, it's like Perry's flipped a page. As I say, he's always been a good man. He's always been a great husband and a great father. But I was talking to him about it earlier this morning, actually, and he said he now feels much more connected to his family. I think we were of two worlds. There was Perry's working world and there was his family world. And because he spent more time in his working world, I think that was the mode that he used to be stuck in. Okay, so this is what I have to do. This is my job, to be a good father, to be a good husband. He was very much in his head, and he's come down now out of his head and into his heart. And he really connects from his heart now. He doesn't get as anxious or as angry or wound up about things as he used to. And he values life an awful lot more. And I don't like saying it in front of Lauren because she's here, my daughter, but she'll know it's true. I really feel that after her father had this NDE, he's actually been putting us before work. It's really brought about a balance for him. Don't get me wrong, when he's at work, he's still a workaholic, but the balance is there now for us. And he's there for us now. And he spends time with his family. He'll spend time with, with our granddaughters and our daughters. And we've just bought our dream apartment that we're sharing together now, and really enjoying life far more than perhaps we did beforehand. It's really, really changed who we are as a family and brought us so much closer together. And of course, the other thing it's done is it's opened Perry up to spirituality. He's always been open to it, and he's always been accepting and very respectful and supportive of what I do and my beliefs. But that was usually my thing, but now more and more it seems to be our thing, because we'll have conversations now that I'll have with my colleagues or during groups like this, I'll have these conversations with Perry now, and we'll look at each other and we'll say, you do know, if anybody was outside was listening to us, they'd be carting us away. You know, the men in the white van will be coming to take us away now. But I can have these conversations with him now. And of course, that's brought us closer. But it took a long time after that NDE for us to get there, because not only was he healing physically, but he was shifting spiritually as well. He was shifting emotionally. And he had to get his head around that too. He didn't understand a lot of it. And we had lots of conversations about, not just about spirituality, but about emotions, and him opening up and understanding that it's okay to talk about emotion. It's good to talk about emotions. It's good to be close to your children, to share special things for them, with them on a different level. But for a long time, the girls and I were, this new dad, how do we encourage this? How do we get used to him being different? We liked the different Perry, but we all had to, I don't know, learn to grow together, I suppose. And we have, and it's been a really, really great experience for us. But it took a long time, and it was a really big journey. It was a big journey for Perry to get there. And of course, I know that with the work that I do, that you can have these experiences now of going to the interlife without the trauma. The work that I do takes people into the interlife, not just past lives, but to that place beyond the light. And it's very interesting because I try not to lead anybody in any of the journeys that they're about to go on, because I'm there with them and I'm journeying with them, but I don't want to lead them. I want to walk by their side with them. And it's incredible of how many of these people take the same journey. It might be slightly different for each person, but each person has their own tunnel. Each person has their own light at the end of the tunnel. When I journey, I always go into a tunnel. I go into a fluid tunnel that takes me up. And it seems that most people have their own tunnel. Sometimes at the end of that tunnel, there's not always people waiting. Sometimes we have to do the journey on our own. Sometimes if we've done this journey before, we're ready to move forward on our own. We don't need necessarily a guide to take us, or a loved one that's passed to take us to where we need to be. Sometimes when we pass, we get what we expect. And if you expect nothing, initially you get nothing. There's nothing until a little spark of memory from somewhere wakes you up and helps you to remember. And then it will all come flooding back and you'll go to where you need to be. Sometimes it can be a religious figure waiting. You know, for Christians and Muslims, it may be an angel. For Buddhists, it may be a Buddha. Or, you know, for somebody else, it may be a goddess. Whatever your beliefs are, that's what will be waiting for you. Because at the end of the day, they will present in a way that you can recognize them. And then once you do recognize them, of course, that presentation can just drift away and you can enjoy being with these beings as pure energy, as they are. You know, even when I started to do clinical hypnotherapy, before I even became involved in past lives and life between lives, I found that even my clinical clients would slip off into places that they didn't expect to go to, and I didn't expect them to go to. You know, I'd only trained in clinical hypnotherapy at that point, and I knew what my beliefs were, but I wasn't quite sure how to handle this. So what I did was go into my heart and follow their journey and use my intuition to go to wherever it was that they needed to be. And wherever that was, they were fully accepting of that. I've had some wonderful, wonderful experiences, beautiful experiences in my journey. Even to get to where I am now, I've followed the signs. I've followed the messages that the universe has sent me, and I feel very, very privileged to be on these journeys with these people. I'd like to tell you about one of the journeys that I've been on that always sticks in my mind. I had twin girls call me once. They were in their mid-20s and they were very, very close girls. And they said, we just feel that although, yes, we are twins and we have this close relationship, there's something else. We just know that we've been together before. And they said, and our dad, you know, he talks about UFOs and, you know, and aliens a lot. And we feel a really, really close connection with him, more than my mum even. So they said, would you conduct a past life regression and life between lives regression for us together? Oh, I said, yeah, we can do that. So the girls came in, beautiful girls, lovely, lovely souls, gorgeous. They looked beautiful. So I had one sitting in my recliner chair, one side of the room, and I had the other one lying on my Reiki table, the other side of my room, and I was sitting in the middle. So I took them into hypnosis and just made sure that they were both where they needed to be. And I set the intent of us traveling to a past life to start with that they had shared together before. So it was a beautiful journey. So we go, we do this and I do that, and 1, 2, 3, and we land in this past life that they have been in together before. So this one over here tells me she feels that she's standing at a dock looking up at a very old wooden ship. Okay. And by the way, they're speaking really, really quietly, so they can't hear each other. And I record it for them. I go over to this one because they're speaking in whispers. I go to this one and I say, and where are you? And she said, well, I feel like I'm sitting at a table looking at my wife, looking at me from the other side of the table. And initially I thought, oh, great, they've gone into different lives. Okay, so, you know, we're going to have to do something about this. So, you know, so I said to this one, okay, just carry on having your conversation with your wife. And I go back to this one and I say, you're looking at this ship, so how old do you feel? And she said, oh, I'm very, very young. I feel I'm probably, you know, 9 or 10 years old. And do you feel male or female? Male. So a little 10-year-old boy looking up at his ship. Okay, so do you have any brothers or sisters at home? Oh, yes, he said. I have 2 sisters at home. Okay. Well, you keep looking at that ship and just notice all of the details on the ship. And I wanted to keep them in the moment. So I went back to this one and I said, so tell me about you and your wife. You're living here, and do you have any family? Yes, we have 2 daughters and a son. Bingo, got it. So I said, okay. So just call your children home to you now. Ask your children to come home. So I go back to this one and I say, it's time to go home now. Go home to mum and dad. So this one goes home, walks through the front door. This one says, oh, here are my children now. The door's opening. And as this one walked through the front door, they both burst into tears. They recognized each other. They had been father and son in a previous lifetime, which was beautiful. So they spent some time together there. And then I took them into the interlife. We went up, and they said that they traveled together as souls. I took them out of those bodies. We went to the interlife, and they were there as souls. And I said, just have a look around and just see if there's anybody here that you notice. I'd taken them to their soul group. And again, they were talking very, very quietly. They didn't know that each other, was with them. They were with each other as souls. They didn't know that in the bodies. And they both said together, it's Dad. So their father had come forward as part of their soul group. And I said, well, let's go to a time where you've all been together. And it turns out that they had a life on a completely different planet together, the 3 of them together. And they both described the planet to me separately, but it was exactly the same description. I took them to another lifetime that they had shared together. And the interesting thing was, one of them had incarnated on Earth in a body. The other one had not incarnated, but was spending time as energy watching the other one during her lifetime. She said, I'm just looking down. I can see, I can see my soulmate. They called each other their soulmates. So part of the same soul group, but a really, really special connection. She said, and I can see my soulmate, and I just want to stay with her. It's not my time to incarnate again, but I don't want to be away from her. So I'm just going to spend time as energy with her. And I feel very, very blessed to have these experiences. It's absolutely amazing that each time I'm privileged enough to work with somebody on one of these journeys. I'm always reminded of Perry's journey and the reaction that it had on us. But I'm always amazed that even though the journeys are very personal, how they get there and what they experience when they get there is very, very similar. So, yeah, that's just a bit of an insight as to my life. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Marie, amazing. Thank you so much. There's so many areas I know in our Q&A that we'll get to, we're going to deep dive into, because you've really so beautifully opened many doors for discussion there. And thank you to Perry. Please pass on a thank you for his openness in sharing his story.
I will, thank you.
Because they're never easy to share. They're big. They're
huge.
Big experiences. Yes. I do have to ask before we go into our public Q&A, and but just in this recording, because this is about the ripple effects of NDEs, and you know, in the literature from near-death experiences, we know that the divorce rates are higher in the NDE community than they are in the regular community.
Yeah.
And so I think your talk today, this video, might attract people who, you know, are not only the experiencers themselves, but those closest to them, and particularly people who have the question mark on how on earth do I navigate whatever that was with either myself or my loved ones, my father, my brother, my uncle, my sister, whatever it might be. And you said a beautiful line there that you and your family, you had to learn to grow together. And so I wonder if you could share, Marie, just some pointers and tips on anyone who might be listening to this, who is thinking, how on earth do we learn to grow together?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a really important point. I think for us, it was very fortunate in that I'm very open spiritually anyway, and always have been. And I've brought our children up to be open spiritually. So when Perry was saying things like, oh, I just feel that I need to spend some time with the girls, I knew that that was coming from within, and he was following his intuition. So a lot of it, I think, for me was about listening to what he was saying and not dismissing anything. Because I could have said, oh, yeah, well, you've had a really major bump on the head, haven't you, if you think you want to spend more time with girls, ha ha, which of course would have mortified him. I think one of the biggest parts is listening. And if you don't understand what they're saying, well, then ask. Instead of dismissing it or saying, well, I really don't know what he's talking about and I don't really want to go there, I think you have to go there, because it's only by going there that you can go to where you need to be together. You have to talk, you have to listen, and you have to get used to those changes. Because, you know, change is good sometimes. Sometimes not so good. Most of the changes, if not all of them, I think for us were good. But I think it's being aware. It's being aware, and if you don't know the answers and you're not getting the answers together, go talk to somebody that perhaps can help you find those answers. You know, I have lots of people come to me and they'll say, I've had an awakening. It may not be an NDE, but it may be an awakening of some description. Or my partner has had an awakening and we really don't know how to deal with this because I don't understand this. I don't know the answers. So if you can't find the answers together, go talk to somebody that can help you find them.
Marvelous. Marie, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know there's going to be golden nuggets for people who have joined us and are listening to the playback. So thank you as always for sharing your story and for the work that you do with folks as well, to be able to dive deep into these spaces. And it's not an ordinary path to walk. And how will people reach you? What is the best way, Marie, if people are interested in connecting with your work?
The best way, I think, is probably to go to my website, which is www.hypnotherapyinbrisbane.com.au. Email me, call me, and if I don't get back to you straight away, it just means I'm busy with a client, but I will always respond. Communication's everything. I know that.
Indeed. Thank you. And we'll put that link up as well for people.
Thank you.
Cheers. And Neela, our co-facilitator, is there anything you would like to say in closing?
No, just Marie, thank you. That was just a wonderful presentation and such a different perspective, as Nicole said, and what we normally have. So thank you. That was a very rich contribution to our collection.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marie.
My pleasure.